Squid Game became a global hit for a reason, but season 3 completely missed the mark for many fans. Between poorly written characters, messy plot twists, and decisions that made no sense, here's why most people agree season 3 completely ruined the show. One of the biggest complaints this season was how poorly Junho's storyline played out. Even though he was a fan favorite in season 1, his return in season 2 barely added anything meaningful to the plot. Fans held on, assuming his scenes were building towards something major in season 3, maybe a confrontation with his brother In-ho or some deeper insight into their past. It's clear they were close once, but viewers wanted more details on what led to Junho risking everything to track down his own brother, even after getting shot by him. People were also hoping the show would peel back the layers on In-ho's character, maybe even show his more human side. Instead, Junho's whole arc went nowhere. The most frustrating part was how he blindly trusted the captain, even when all signs pointed to him being sketchy. Mr. Choi literally warned him with proof, yet Junho ignored common sense and kept following the guy around. In fact, some viewers pointed out that if you completely erased Junho's scenes this season, the plot wouldn't change one bit. And then there's their reunion. After everything, the only thing Junho managed to say when he finally confronted In-ho was the same why line from season 1. Sure, it fits with the moment since the island was about to blow up, but after all the buildup, people expected more. Maybe not a drawn-out conversation, but at least some real confrontation. Instead, we got one word, an exchange of looks, and that was it. Technically realistic, maybe, but from a storytelling angle, it just felt incomplete. A lot of people were let down with how some characters were completely ruined this season, especially Dae-ho. His character started off with promise back in season 2. He introduced himself as a former Marine, quickly gained Gi-hun's trust, and even helped them during the 6 Legs challenge. At first, he came across as reliable, someone you'd want on your side, but when the revolt kicked off, cracks in his story started to show. For a guy with military training, Dae-ho panicked way too quickly. He didn't even seem to know how to use his weapon properly, wasting all his ammo by blindly shooting over barriers, which immediately raised red flags with viewers. Then, instead of helping, he volunteered to run back for more supplies but ended up falling apart. While searching fallen guards for gear, he started mumbling to himself, completely overwhelmed. When Young-shik found him and pressed for answers, Dae-ho couldn't even speak. He ignored the radio calls from the group, hid under a bed, and never came back. In season 3, Gi-hun starts basically hunting Dae-ho down, him as the reason everything went wrong. Things come to a head during the hide-and-seek game, where Gi-hun is the seeker and Dae-ho is one of the ones hiding. But what frustrated fans was how the entire situation unfolded. Dae-ho, knowing Gi-hun is after him, doesn't act scared or guilty. Instead, he flips the situation, yelling at Gi-hun and blaming him for the failure of the revolt. In the middle of the argument, Dae-ho admits he was never a Marine but part of social service, meaning he'd never even held a gun. From there, the two end up in a physical fight and Gi-hun strangles him. A lot of viewers hated the social service twist. Before season 3 aired, a popular theory suggested Dae-ho was a Marine suffering from PTSD. He even told Jung-bae he was from Marine Cohort 1140, which made that theory believable. That's important, considering Cohort 1140 enlisted in April 2011. The same year, one of the Marine Corps' darkest incidents happened. Just 3 months later, a soldier opened fire inside the barracks, taking the lives of 4 and leaving another severely injured. Soldiers ran for their lives, some still in their underwear, which the internet later mocked with the term pantsoon. But behind the jokes was a serious crisis: brutal hazing, misconduct, soldiers turning on each other, and a wave of soldiers taking their own lives, all exposed during that period. That's why people didn't buy the idea that Dae-ho lied about being a Marine for attention, as there was no glory in saying you enlisted in 2011, only trauma and controversy. The PTSD angle would have given his character real depth, showing someone damaged by their past but still trying to survive. But instead, the writers went for the easy coward in disguise route. The other issue? This season was already full of cowardly characters, making Dae-ho's reveal feel repetitive. Plus, this twist basically handed Gi-hun an excuse to blame him entirely for the revolt failing, even though anyone paying attention knows it never would have succeeded, ammo or not. When Dae-ho's story still had that layer of uncertainty and potential PTSD, it left room for debate. Now, the blame falls squarely on him, while In-ho, who played a huge role in sabotaging the rebellion, walks away clean. It also didn't sit right with viewers that Gi-hun never heard Dae-ho out. Based on Gi-hun's character over the seasons, it feels more believable that he would have at least listened before turning on him. Dae-ho helped during the games, tried to stop them from continuing, and knew the rebellion could cost him everything. But still, he fought alongside them. As a Reddit user also mentioned, he felt so wrong, like a completely different character, and seriously, no one talked to him before the game, like they just left him alone. It just felt like they wanted to make Gi-hun not look that wrong for taking his life. Another thing that left viewers completely frustrated was Hyunju's passing. By season 2 and early season 3, Hyunju had easily become one of the most loved characters. Throughout her time in the games, Hyunju built real connections with other players. She also became one of the strongest figures in Gi-hun's rebellion, as she took down guards, taught others how to defend themselves, and risked everything to bring back supplies. She even put her life on the line again during the hide-and-seek game after the revolt, fighting to protect Geumja and Junhee and taking lives when she had no choice. What made it worse is how close she came to actually getting out. Hyunju had found the exit, had the keys, and could have finally saved herself. But true to her character, she stayed behind to help Geumja, to help Junhee deliver her baby, to make sure they all got out together. It should have been a turning point, the moment all her sacrifices paid off. Instead, the writers pulled the rug out from under everyone. Just when it looked like they were safe, Myung-gi appeared and stabbed her in the back. Literally. However, the way it played out made no sense, and viewers called it out immediately. This is someone with military training, someone who survived countless fatal moments, fought through impossible situations, and constantly showed sharp instinct. Yet somehow, she stood there with her back wide open to the hallway. After everything we've seen her survive, that felt completely out of character. And realistically, Hyunju should have been one of the finalists. Throughout season 2, she proved over and over that nobody could take her down, but instead she gets taken out in the most random, lazy way possible. As a Twitter user put it, Hyunju being the best part of every scene and subplot she was in, and for literally nothing except relationship drama for a cishet man in such a random way in comparison to everyone else. And sure, most viewers expected that Hyunju's story would end in tragedy at some point, since this is Squid Game after all, but what really left people frustrated was the timing. Her passing happened on the second episode. Meanwhile, characters with barely any screen time or story relevance somehow made it all the way to the finale. It just didn't add up. Another thing that really pushed viewers over the edge was how badly the female characters were handled this season, especially compared to how much buildup they had before. By the time the finale rolled around, there were barely any women left in the game, and the ones who did have major storylines either got rushed endings, inconsistent arcs, or were taken off in ways that made no sense. It left people questioning whether there was some weird message behind it, or if the writers just didn't care to flesh them out properly. Take Geumja's ending, for example. The whole situation with her and Young-shik felt like the writers were recycling the same tragic formula from season 1. In that season, we saw the husband and wife forced to face off in the marbles game, knowing only one of them could survive. She loses, and not long after, the husband ends his own life out of guilt. Fast forward to this season, and it's basically the same thing. Geumja ends up stabbing her son, and then, unable to live with it, she takes her own life. Then there's Junhee. Her storyline was frustrating for different reasons. She literally just gave birth in the middle of that chaos. No pain meds, no real medical help, yet somehow, her biggest problem seems to be her twisted ankle. It completely shattered the realism and made people wonder if the writers even thought these scenes through. One Twitter user pointed out just how ridiculous the whole thing was, writing, "She gave birth in like 10 minutes after her water broke, because when they found that room clock, there showed like 15 minutes left. She gave birth and there was not less than 5 minutes left." To make things even more frustrating, a lot of viewers were upset with how Junhee's ending was tied to the baby storyline. The fact that she basically sacrificed herself so the baby could live didn't sit right with people, mostly because it came across as some weird pro-life message. It just felt unnecessary and forced, like the writers were trying to sneak a message in there that didn't belong. The same goes for Gi-hun. Yes, he made sure the baby survived, but in doing that, he basically abandoned his own daughter again. He spent so long trying to get back to her, only to throw himself into yet another situation where he's prioritizing someone else's life over his own family. And even if you wanted to look at it symbolically, like the baby represents some kind of new beginning, that falls apart too, because the games still continue after everything that happened. If the writers wanted to send the message that nothing changes, fine, but that would have made way more sense if they had just ended it with season 1. Instead, they dragged it out, added in this new baby plot, wrote off beloved characters, and made it all seem pointless since in the end, the same exact cycle keeps repeating. Finally, the finale and Gi-hun's character completely lost people. Fans were frustrated that by season 3, Gi-hun barely felt like the same person. He had almost no lines, hardly reacted to anything, and didn't interact with the players around him, completely opposite to the Gi-hun we've seen throughout the series. It felt like he was just there to push the plot along so the baby could win, rather than being the heart of the story like before. Even side characters, some of whom barely existed until the finale, had more development than him. Then there's the Daeho situation. From the beginning, Gi-hun has always been shown as the one player who keeps his humanity no matter how dark things get. Yet, in this season, he suddenly takes Daeho's life with no hesitation, even though he spared people like Player 100, the shaman, and the finalists, which didn't make sense. We're supposed to believe he's struggling with guilt over Jongbae, but instead of processing it, he turns on Daeho, even though the latter had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, when he finally meets In-ho, finds out he's the front man, and that In-ho's the one who took Jongbae's life, he does nothing. It made his choices feel inconsistent and completely out of character. The ending didn't help either. Viewers called out how forced and illogical it all felt, as if the whole plot was twisted just to make sure the baby won. Instead of keeping the player count realistic by taking some players off during the jump rope game, they threw in randoms for no reason. Myunggi's attack during round 2 of the final game also made no sense, since he could have waited for round 3, but they had him freak out early. And when Myunggi and Gi-hun fought, they both conveniently ignored the button that could have ended it all, turning it into this ridiculous scene where they danced around it like it didn't exist. Gi-hun's passing ended up feeling empty, like it was all for nothing. The VIPs still escaped, the front man didn't care, the games kept running, which made his sacrifice pointless and easily avoidable. But while the flaws were impossible to ignore, some hidden details slipped right past most viewers. Since the very start of the series, Squid Game has included numerous small details and Easter eggs, and the 3rd season brings this aspect to a whole new level thanks to countless tiny hints and hidden secrets that are easy to miss. One aspect that many viewers didn't realize is how the VIP rooms in seasons 2 and 3 are different from those in the first season. While the general structure and setup remained the same, the producers decided to tweak the background and various details, switching from black marble to white one. This change was made because the producers wanted the floor where the VIPs are sitting to resemble the sea, mirroring how the games are taking place on an island far away from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, it's clear that the golden masks of the VIPs resemble animals, but most viewers don't know that these aren't just random animals, but each represents a key image in Korean culture. These images range from power to courage and make each member of the VIPs represent a different aspect of high society. Also, when No-ul enters the front man's room, she finds 2 mannequins, one with an owl mask and another one showing Oh Il-nam from season 1. In many cultures, owls represent misfortune and the afterlife, which is reflected in the fact that Il-nam appears in the show even after his passing. Another interesting interpretation of the masks is the idea that the VIPs are animals who are watching humans in a cage, which is a clever and ironic twist that many viewers didn't realize. Meanwhile, a tiny detail that's easy to miss is instead outside the island where the games take place. As suspicions about the role of Captain Park rise, Choi Woo-sok enters the captain's house to investigate. His suspicions turn out to be correct when he finds a picture of the captain with the recruiter of the game. However, Woo-sok didn't realize that another picture instead showed the captain with the front man Hwang In-ho, which suggests that the two weren't only working together but were actually close friends. A very interesting detail has instead been hidden in plain sight throughout the season and is only slowly revealed as the show goes on. In the main room where all the contestants sleep, small images of people falling can be seen on the wall from the start. This was actually a hint for the final game in which the players have to throw each other from the top of tall platforms, but none of the contestants were able to understand it. These images also reflect the psychological state of the players who have been pushed into an extreme state, excluded from the world. That's not the only interesting detail in the dorm room, and as the beds are slowly removed, a large text appears on the wall which reads Hodi mihi kras tibi. This is a Latin phrase that translates to today it's me, tomorrow it will be you, which is a reminder of the fragility of life. This mirrors the vulnerability of the contestants in Squid Game, and also serves as a warning that anyone could be the next victim. Also, this phrase has been traditionally inscribed on graves in Europe, especially in medieval times, and this aspect is reflected in the drawing of the chessboard-like graveyard on the wall of the dorm room. The main room isn't the only area that's filled with details, and many other locations where the games take place include small Easter eggs. One of these is the hide-and-seek arena, which includes brick walls and numerous stairs in a way that reminds viewers of the neighborhood where the contestants play marbles in Season 1. Also, the two games mirror each other in several ways, and in both cases, they end with some of the main characters being taken out in emotionally devastating ways. The production designer of the series, Choi Kyung-sun, explained that the similar environment of the two games wasn't entirely intentional, but the space of the hide-and-seek challenge naturally evolved to resemble the marbles neighborhood, as it had to hold heartbreaking scenes featuring characters in emotional turmoil. However, an important difference is that in Season 1, the alleyways served as a narrative background, while in Season 3, these are an important aspect of the game, as the players have to wander in a maze while looking for an exit. Another interesting detail of the hide-and-seek arena is the roof, which is decorated with a star-filled night sky. The art director explained that this aspect was included as a way to emphasize the contrast between the calm and beauty of looking at the stars and the frantic and brutal events of the game. The violence of the hide-and-seek game also contrasts with the walls filled with scribbles and colorful paint, which instead evoke innocence. The idea of the contrast between violence and innocence actually reaches its height during this game, as Jun-hee gives birth to her baby while surrounded by people attacking each other. Special attention was given to the room where the baby was born, which, according to the art director, was designed to express the depths of the sea to symbolize amniotic fluid and the birth of life. Similarly, the room where Gumja attacks her son to stop him from hurting Jun-hee is decorated with rainbows and butterflies, which are images of dreams and hope, heightening the contrast between the setting and the events that take place there. The art director also revealed that a key inspiration behind the entire production design of Squid Game is the Mobius strip, a surface that loops on itself. The maze-like staircase, seen numerous times throughout the series, and the confusing alleyways of the hide-and-seek arena both reflect the idea of how everything comes full circle, looping back to the beginning. The hide-and-seek challenge also features another tiny detail, a scene in which the game timer shows 456, mirroring the player number of Gi-hun, 456. This time marks the moment in which Gi-hun finally reaches Dae-ho, and it's a turning point for the main character. After blaming Dae-ho for the failure of his rebellion at the end of Season 2, Gi-hun unleashes his anger on him and finally takes him out, breaking his promise to save everyone and instead doing what he never wanted to do, taking another person's life. After hide and seek in the following game, the players have to cross a bridge while avoiding a large mechanical swinging pole in an extreme version of jumping rope. The setting is quite simple, with two large dolls holding the rope and a narrow bridge over a deep pit, but it still hides some interesting details. The bridge is stylized as train tracks, and this isn't only a stylistic choice, as areas near railways are often associated with poverty. This isn't all, as the train tracks also represent the passing of time and the nostalgia and innocence of kids playing with toy trains, again in a stark contrast with the violence of the game. The arena of the final game is even simpler, as it only includes three large platforms shaped as a triangle, circle, and square, three shapes often seen throughout the series. Even this extremely simple setting includes an important detail, as a sign on the wall written in Korean ironically states, "Safety first." Other connected details are instead scattered throughout the season, most notably the running theme of faith and religion. On several occasions, players are shown praying or showing faith in some higher power, and this is mostly evident with the character of Shaman Sun Yo and her followers. players. However, when she tries to use her supposed powers during the hide-and-seek game, she fails again and again in finding an exit, and the other players start doubting her. After all her followers have been taken out, she escapes and finds the exit by pure luck, but she doesn't have the right keys to open the door. After finding player 100, who has the missing keys, she traces her steps back to the door, not thanks to her powers, but with a series of arrows that she drew on the walls. The gods she prayed to throughout the second and third seasons seem to have abandoned her when player 100 betrays her and exits the arena without her, and she ends up being slain by Min-soo. What's even more interesting is that Min-soo also gets intertwined in the religious theme. In season 2, Thanos had a cross in which he used to store illegal substances, but after his passing, the cross was taken by Nam-gyu. However, he loses the cross during the hide-and-seek game and Min-soo finds it. He decides to take the substances and starts to go crazy, seeing visions of Thanos, Nam-gyu, and Se-mi, who had passed away in season 2. In the end, Nam-gyu is taken out during the jumping rope game while trying to get the cross back, while Min-soo is pushed off the edge after freaking out because of the substances he took. Throughout the third season, Thanos' cross acts as an escape from reality for Nam-gyu and then Min-soo. But once the effects of the substances fade out, they're both left with even more desperation. Interestingly, both of them end up losing their lives because of their obsession with this cross. Meanwhile, one of the most intriguing and unexplored aspects of the series was hinted at in a detail that almost all viewers have missed. Throughout the show, the room containing all the information about the contestants and the guards is seen a few times. Towards the end of season 3, No-ul enters this room and starts to scan the archives. While she's looking around, various binders are shown, including some which are labeled with the phrase blacklist in Korean. No-ul ignores these binders and ends up burning everything, so viewers never learn what's in those files. This tiny detail might suggest that the selection process doesn't only pick as contestants poor and vulnerable people, but some individuals are actually excluded. However, the blacklist might also include names of VIPs who have run afoul of the organizers. While it's hard to tell whether it will ever be revealed what names are in the blacklist and why, this is yet another small detail that shows how the world of Squid Game is much deeper and wider than what it may seem. But it turns out the cast and creators had even more secrets up their sleeves. Squid Game 3 was the long-awaited final season of the hit show that had everyone holding their breath since day one. As expected, the stakes were higher, the games were wilder, and behind the scenes, things got even weirder. From intense physical prep to bizarre filming conditions, the cast went through some truly unexpected challenges to bring the finale to life. One of the weirdest moments in Squid Game 3 shows up pretty early, and if you've already watched episode 3, you probably know exactly what we're talking about: the return of the VIPs. Just like in the first season, the second time these masked characters step into the story, things start to fall apart with their gold animal masks, stiff acting, and the kind of awkward English dialogue that makes you cringe in your seat. The whole scene feels out of place compared to the emotional, powerful performances from the Korean cast. It's such a sudden shift in tone that it pulls you right out of the episode, and fans everywhere were left wondering how the show managed to make the exact same mistake twice. This time around, one of the VIPs is American, there's a Brit or two, and maybe even a Chinese woman, and they all take part in the second game by helping with the cleanup, which basically means going around shooting the players who didn't make it. It could have been a really intense moment, but instead it just feels off. Their lines sound super fake, the delivery is stiff, and it honestly seems like they recorded their voices in a totally different room and just slapped the audio on top later. A lot of viewers even started guessing that the lines were dubbed over in post-production, which would explain why it doesn't feel natural at all. It was all so bad that some fans started wondering why they were included in the show at all. What makes this whole thing even weirder is that fans already complained about this back in season 1. The VIPs were one of the most hated parts of the show, and everyone thought the writers would fix it for the final season. There's a theory floating around that maybe the creators did this on purpose to make it feel like an old cheesy action movie, but that doesn't really seem to be true. What's wild, however, is that there has already been a full explanation for why the VIP scenes feel so weird, and it came out right after the first season. One of the actors talked about it in an interview with The Guardian, and honestly, it sounds like the perfect recipe for disaster. He explained that most of the time, the English dialogue isn't written by native speakers. Sometimes it's literally just run through Google Translate, which makes the lines sound super unnatural right from the start. On top of that, the actors usually don't get to read the rest of the script, so they have no idea what the tone of the show even is. They're just handed their scenes and told to roll with it. To make things even worse, the filming setup itself is also odd. According to the actor, the VIPs had to wear heavy plaster masks and sit on couches that were placed ridiculously far apart, like 20 to 30 feet away from the next person. So instead of acting like real people having a conversation, they were basically shouting their lines into the air, hoping it sounded okay. If that doesn't explain the awkward energy, nothing will. On another note, one of the most emotional moments in Squid Game 3 comes during the intense game of hide and seek, when we say goodbye to Hyunju, a fan favorite character introduced in season 2. Hyunju joined the game with a powerful motivation: to win enough money to fund her gender-affirming surgery after being discharged from the military. From the start, her story stood out for how raw and real it felt, and she quickly became one of the most memorable players in the competition. So, when her time in the game came to an end in season 3, it wasn't just another dramatic scene, it really hit hard, not just for viewers, but also for Park Sung-hoon. He had an incredibly tough job of showing Hyunju's final moments on screen. He had to cry on command, express the weight of everything the character had been through, and still make it feel real without going over the top. What many don't know, however, is that he managed to nail this scene in one single take. According to Sung-hoon, the director gave him very specific instructions. He wanted a single tear to roll down Hyunju's face just as the camera started pulling away. It sounded like the kind of detail that could take hours to get right, but somehow, Sung-hoon did it perfectly instantly. When the scene was finalized, the entire crew broke into cheers, clapping and celebrating how amazingly it had been pulled off. Even Sung-hoon admitted he didn't expect it to go that smoothly, but in the end, it became one of those rare moments where everything just clicked. For Sung-hoon, though, it wasn't just about the tear. He also had to correctly convey how Hyunju was feeling in that moment. In the same episode, she watches another contestant give birth, and that scene holds a deep emotional weight for her character. As a trans woman, witnessing something as powerful and sacred as new life brings up a rush of emotions like hope, longing, and quiet heartbreak all at once. So when her time in the game comes to an end shortly after, it's not just a dramatic goodbye, but something far more personal and meaningful. Sung-hoon explained he made it a point to stay true to the tone of the script, showing that Hyunju's soul left her eyes in that exact moment. Filming this season wasn't just tough on an emotional level, it also demanded a lot of physical action from the cast members. Some of the most intense scenes in the show required real action training, especially for Sung-hoon, who had to prepare for one of Hyunju's biggest moments in the series. Before her final scene, Hyunju finds herself in a brutal fight where she takes down 2 other players in self-defense. The moment is fast, violent, and messy, but behind the chaos is a ton of careful preparation. To get ready for it, the cast went through basic training at an action school before jumping into the choreography for the scene. While a few moves were adjusted on set, most of what made it to the screen came straight from those early rehearsals. What made things even more intense was that Sung-hoon had spent years training at the famous Shaolin Temple in China, known worldwide for martial arts. His skill level was so high that it made the entire sequence flow naturally and look incredibly real. Sung-hoon explained that working with someone with that experience helped him bring the scene to life in a way that felt exhausting but believable. Beyond all the fighting, however, there was still an emotional layer Sung-hoon had to focus on. In this particular scene, Hyunju isn't just fighting for her own survival. She's also protecting Gumja, Junhee, and the newborn baby. She's someone with a strong moral compass, and even though she's forced to take lives, it's clear that she doesn't want to. That's why, during the attack scenes, Sung-hoon made the decision to have Hyunju look away each time, because even though she had no choice, she couldn't bear to face what she was doing. The cast also revealed that making these action scenes look effortless on screen was anything but easy. Filming them took serious time and energy, with multiple takes just to get every little detail right. For example, right after Hyunju takes down her final opponent, she pauses to wipe the blood and sweat from her face. It's a quiet but powerful moment that really shows off her strength and presence. Director Hwang Dong-hyuk wanted it to feel iconic, so the crew ended up filming it over 10 times to make sure she looked as cool and composed as possible. Now, for something a little more personal. While most fans would assume that starring in a global hit like Squid Game would be a dream come true, it turns out that Gi-hun wasn't particularly thrilled by the success. In fact, during the show's peak in popularity, he admitted he could barely enjoy any of it. Behind the scenes, Gi-hun was dealing with intense pressure and stress, worried that he might not live up to expectations. Even as the world constantly talked about the show, he felt overwhelmed by the idea of letting people down and said that he tried not to hope for too much so he wouldn't disappoint anyone. What makes his story even more surprising is how he got cast in the first place. Unlike some of the other actors who auditioned through regular auditions, Gi-hun ended up landing the role almost by accident. He had simply stopped by the production company to pay a quick visit, which was supposed to be a courtesy call, but the timing was perfect. The team hadn't cast the role of Junho yet, and after hearing Ha-jun's voice, they asked him right then and there if he'd be willing to audition. It was a completely unplanned opportunity that led to one of the most iconic characters in the series. Squid Game wasn't only stressful for the cast, it turns out even the director ended up paying a pretty painful price. And no, this isn't some clickbait punchline. Hwang Dong-hyuk revealed he literally lost multiple teeth making the show. He explained that across the 3 seasons, he had to pull out at least 10 teeth due to the insane stress and pressure of bringing the series to life. He first started losing them during season 1, which already pushed him to his limit. Then, while working on the 3rd and final season, 2 more had to go. He even joked that he hasn't put them back in yet and is still waiting to do so. You'd think that things would get easier after the first season blew up worldwide, but that wasn't the case. Dong-hyuk explained that writing and filming seasons 2 and 3 basically had to happen at the same time with very little breathing room. It felt like working on one giant project that never ended, and it was so physically demanding that it took a serious toll on his health. With nearly a full year of non-stop production and pressure to outdo what came before, it's no wonder the man walked away with gaps in his smile. To end things on a more lighthearted note, let's talk about all the things Cate Blanchett had to do in preparation for her cameo in season 3. In the final season, she appears as a mysterious recruiter, taking on the iconic role of the person who challenges potential players to a game of dokji, the traditional Korean slap game with folded paper tiles. This was Cate's first time ever playing dokji, and from the second she arrived on set, she was all in. According to the cast and crew, while they were busy setting up the scene, she was off to the side, practicing over and over again, totally focused. The production team had sent her the dokji pieces in advance so she could try it out at home, but she didn't get the hang of it before the shoot. So right there on set, director Dong-hyuk stepped in and gave her a quick crash course. The best part about this is that the final show that made it into the show was completely real. She had actually just managed to flip the piece after trying for so long, and her reaction was totally genuine. Everyone on set was blown away by how naturally she pulled it off. With just a few lines and a quick game, Cate managed to leave a good impression on everyone involved. So as you can see, whether it was tears, teeth, or tiles, Squid Game 3 proved that behind every intense scene, there was an even crazier story, because during filming, nothing comes without effort. And while the creators teased plenty of hidden clues, nothing prepared viewers for the heartbreak that followed. The first 2 seasons of Squid Game were already brutal, but season 3 made everything feel even more intense. From the very first episode to the final scene, it was non-stop heartbreak. But which moments truly shattered viewers the most? Young-shik's passing definitely shocked viewers, but at the same time, some felt like it was bound to happen. Ever since he first showed up in season 2, Park Young-shik's been a character people couldn't agree on. Some saw him as a loyal son who cared for his mom, while others thought he had it coming. His situation wasn't pretty, as he was drowning in 250 million won of debt and even borrowed another 100 million from shady loan sharks and gambling rings. His creditors didn't exactly go easy on him either, as they gave him a deadline and made it clear there would be serious consequences if he didn't pay up. That's how he ended up in the Squid Games in the first place. But what made things worse is that his mom, Gumja, joined too, all because of his mess. And even with her in there, Young-shik still voted to keep the games going, which made a lot of viewers furious. As one Reddit user put it, "I hate that he voted to stay. I see that as him taking the life of his mom." Some people defended Young-shik, saying he felt real, someone who made mistakes but wanted to fix them. It was also obvious to many that he truly cared about his mom and wanted her to survive the games. But that's not how things played out. The whole mother-son situation had viewers coming up with endless theories, saying that maybe they'd protect each other, maybe one of them wouldn't make it, or maybe they'd sacrifice themselves to save the other. But what actually happened took most people by surprise. During the hide-and-seek round, while Geumja and Junhee were struggling to unlock the exit, Youngshik showed up behind them with a knife in hand, ready to attack Junhee and her newborn just so he and his mom could survive. Geumja begged him to stop and even told him to stab her instead, but Youngshik pushed forward, determined to escape no matter what. That's when Geumja grabbed a hidden knife from her hairpin and turned it on her own son. Moments later, the guard shot Youngshik for failing to finish the game. What followed left viewers completely split, as on one hand, viewers pitied him, saying he acted out of fear and desperation. On the other hand, people thought that everything that happened was his fault, since after all, he was the reason his mom ended up in the games. He voted to keep them going, and he nearly took the lives of Junhee and her baby just to save himself. In the end, his downfall felt like the inevitable result of every reckless choice he made. After everything that happened, Geumja is completely crushed with guilt, blaming herself for what happened to her son. Once the remaining players return to the dorm, she pulls Gi-hun aside and begs him to look after Junhee and her baby, even opening up about her past and the struggles she faced with her husband. But it's clear her heart isn't in the game anymore. That night, while everyone sleeps, Geumja takes her own life by hanging herself. By morning, the pink guards quietly come in with a box to carry her away, marking one of the season's most devastating scenes. Daeho's exit was another moment that completely split the fan base. Kang Daeho first appeared back in the season 2, introducing himself as a former Marine, quickly earning Gi-hun's trust and joining his group. He even helped them get through the 6 legs challenge, which made him seem reliable at first. But cracks started showing during the revolt. For someone with military training, Daeho panicked fast, as he seemingly didn't even know how to handle his weapon. He also wasted all his bullets by blindly firing over the barriers, which immediately made viewers suspicious. Once the ammo ran out, Daeho offered to run back to the dorms to grab more, but when he got there, he completely fell apart. While nervously searching the fallen guards for supplies, he started muttering to himself, clearly overwhelmed. Youngshik found him and pressed him for answers, but Daeho could barely speak. The group kept radioing him for updates, but Daeho broke down, hiding under a bed and never returning to help. Season 3 picks up with Daeho trying to stay invisible, but that doesn't last long. In a conversation with Gi-hun, Youngshik blames Daeho for everything that went wrong during the revolt, which sets off Gi-hun. Suddenly, Gi-hun seems ready to turn on Daeho, furious over how things ended, but that part confused a lot of viewers. After 2 seasons, most people expected Gi-hun to carry the guilt himself, not project it onto Daeho, especially since, realistically, even with the extra bullets, their small group never stood a chance against the army of pink guards. Then, during the hide-and-seek game, Gi-hun and Daeho end up on opposite sides, Gi-hun as the seeker, Daeho as one of the ones hiding. But this part of the story left a lot of viewers frustrated with how both characters were written. Even before the game kicks off, Daeho figures out that Gi-hun is coming for him, and instead of acting scared or guilty, he completely flips the narrative, yelling at Gi-hun and blaming him for how badly the revolt ended. For a lot of fans, this didn't sit. At the end of season 2, Daeho was shown feeling ashamed and guilty for freezing up and not helping his fellow players, so suddenly turning aggressive didn't add up. Nevertheless, things spiral fast and the two end up fighting, which ends with Gi-hun choking Daeho until he loses his life, which sparks even more confusion. Throughout the series, Gi-hun was never the violent type. No matter how cruel the games got, they never turned him into someone who would willingly harm others, which was made obvious during the jump rope game when he refused to hurt anyone, even though his own life and Junhee's were on the line. So the idea that Gi-hun would spare the shaman and the other players but suddenly snap and take out Daeho with his bare hands, it just didn't line up. To a lot of viewers, it felt like the writers twisted both characters just to force this idea that Gi-hun had finally lost his humanity, but nothing else in the season supported that. Sure, some people were glad to see Daeho gone after how badly he messed up the revolt, but many felt his storyline in season 3 was messy, rushed, and didn't match anything we'd seen from him before. One of the first losses in season 3 that completely caught people off guard was Hyunju's. Despite happening early on, it hit hard, especially since Hyunju had become such a favorite among among viewers. Her backstory made a lot of people root for her. She had served as a staff sergeant in the military but lost everything after starting her transition. Cut off from her family, friends, and any real support, Hyunju was left drowning in over 330 million won of debt. Joining the Squid Game was her last shot, not just to pay off what she owed, but to finally move to Thailand and complete her transition surgeries. Throughout Season 2 and the beginning of Season 3, Hyunju built strong connections with other players, especially Gumja, Young-shik, Young-mi, who didn't survive Season 2, and eventually Junhee. When Gi-hun led the revolt, Hyunju quickly became one of the key players. She took out pink guards, taught others how to defend themselves, led the group, and even risked everything to get more ammunition. During the first challenge after the revolt, Hyunju's bravery was on full display again as she fought to protect Gumja and Junhee, even taking a life to shield them. At the end, Hyunju could have escaped as she had found the exit door and had the necessary keys to open it, but instead of saving herself, she turned back to help Gumja and Junhee, even staying to help Junhee deliver her baby. It was supposed to be their moment to finally get out safely, but just as they thought they were in the clear, Myung-gi stabbed Hyunju in the back. Realizing what he'd done, Myung-gi covered it up, lying to Namgyu that no one else was there. Hyunju's final scene was brutal to watch, with Gumja and Junhee crying over her while Gumja gently closed her eyes. Out of all the losses in the series, Hyunju stood out the most, especially knowing how much she gave up, including her own safety, her chance at freedom, all to protect the people she cared about, with one user writing, "You know what? In my head, at least she's reunited with Young-mi." Additionally, one of the moments that hit viewers the hardest was Junhee's fate. Being the only pregnant player throughout all 3 seasons, she naturally became the center of care and attention, especially from Gi-hun, Hyunju, and Gumja. But that special focus also hinted that her story wouldn't have a happy ending, and sadly that proved true. Early in Season 3, Junhee goes into labor. With the help of Hyunju and Gumja, she manages to deliver her baby, but just before that, she injures her ankle badly after a fall down the stairs. That injury slows her down and becomes a crucial problem. During the jump rope game, Junhee knows she can't keep up with her swollen ankle. She trusts Gi-hun to take the baby across safely, a promise he made to Gumja. Gi-hun does manage to get the newborn to safety, but Junhee realizes she won't be able to cross herself and no one else can come to help. Faced with no other choice, she makes the heartbreaking decision to step off the edge, ending her journey. Losing Junhee was crushing for everyone watching. Not only did she lose the friends who had stood by her, but she also had to let go of the games and the baby she just brought into the world. It's easy to see why her passing left such a deep impact. Without a doubt, the most heartbreaking moment of the season was Gi-hun's own fate in the final chapter. The last challenge of the games was ruthless in its simplicity. The remaining players had to cross 3 towering stone platforms, but moving on meant sacrificing one of the others. Going into this round, Gi-hun and the baby were at a serious disadvantage, especially against player 100 and Myung-gi, who were mostly selfish, violent, and focused on winning the money. Somehow, Gi-hun made it to the final round. Protecting the baby, armed with a knife given by In-ho, he managed to reach the final tower alongside Myung-gi. Myung-gi tried to convince Gi-hun to hand over the baby, but Gi-hun saw through the plan, suspecting Myung-gi would sacrifice his own child to survive. They battled fiercely, and Myung-gi ended up falling, but because neither pressed the button to start the round, Myung-gi's fall didn't count as the required sacrifice. That left Gi-hun with an impossible choice: sacrifice the baby to save himself or give up his own life so the baby could live. To the shock of the VIPs watching, Gi-hun refused to harm the newborn. Holding the baby close, he stared back at the hidden spectators, knowing they were there but ignoring their expectations. Then, quietly, he placed the baby on the ground, kissed her, and spoke directly to the audience. "We are not horses, we are humans." After that, he fell to his demise. Though many expected this outcome, the loss still hit hard. Gi-hun's sacrifice wasn't just about survival, it was a powerful stand for humanity. And naturally, the people who lived it had the most to say about how it all wrapped up. Squid Game 3 might have wrapped up the story for good, but not everything about the final season was as clear-cut as it looked. From plot twists that shocked even the cast to unexpected inspiration sources, there were plenty of secrets hiding behind the camera. Let's dive into all the surprising things that happened off-screen while the world was watching the games unfold. One of the biggest surprises in Squid Game 3 was the return and upgrade of the infamous VIPs. First introduced back in Season 1, these masked millionaires were always meant to represent the twisted extremes of wealth and power. While the desperate players fight for survival, it's the VIPs who sit comfortably at the top, treating the games like a private playground and betting on human lives like it's some high-stakes horse race. In the final season, though, these so-called dirtbag millionaires take things to an even darker level. Originally described to the actors as clueless, vulgar, and completely detached from reality, the Season 1 VIPs were more than just comic relief. They were supposed to represent a mirror held up to late-stage capitalism. Led by the secret mastermind Oh Il-nam, the group was built around the idea that money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys control and the ability to play God for fun. But in Season 3, the masks come off and things are taken to the next level. Instead of just watching from velvet couches, this new generation of VIPs steps directly into the games, trading their gold masks and designer suits for pink uniforms and rifles. They don't just observe the violence anymore, rather, they become the violence, ending players' lives in a twisted attempt to feel something again. According to director Hwang Dong-hyuk, this shift was intentional. The VIPs were always meant to be the true villains of the story, and by bringing them into the action in Season 3, the show exposes just how far their moral decline has gone. This new twist didn't just come out of nowhere, though. The evolution of the VIPs was heavily inspired by what's happening in the real world. According to the director, their more hands-on, unmasked role was meant to reflect the way modern power works today. In the past, the people who truly ran things, so the ones pulling strings behind the system, usually stayed hidden, operating quietly from the shadows. But now, especially in places like the US, that's changed. These days, the people with the most power are stepping into the spotlight, making it very clear who's in charge. Dong-hyuk even pointed to the rise of modern-day oligarchs. These are wealthy elites who don't just influence politics and society behind closed doors, but actively show off their control. These tech billionaires and political donors are no longer wearing metaphorical masks. Instead, they're out in the open, proudly declaring their influence and shaping entire systems right in front of us. That bold, public dominance is exactly what the director wanted the Season 3 VIPs to reflect. And although Dong-hyuk didn't model the VIPs after any specific real-life figures, the resemblance to today's billionaire class is hard to ignore. After Season 1, he joked that one of the VIPs ended up looking a little too much like Donald Trump, completely by accident. And when he looked back at what he had written for Season 3, another familiar figure like Elon Musk came to mind. As one of the world's richest and most visible men, Musk isn't just a tech CEO. He's a showman, a constant media presence, and a symbol of how money and influence can bleed into every part of life. The VIPs may be fictional, but the world they represent feels closer to reality than most of us would like to admit. Interestingly enough, a big part of Squid Game's disturbing voting system in the second and third seasons is inspired by recent political events. When the first season was released, much of the show's core message came from the director's personal struggles following the 2008 financial crisis and from watching the rise of wealth inequality around the world. Things like the crypto boom, the unchecked power of tech giants, and even Donald Trump's presidency helped shape the story's brutal take on capitalism and power. But since then, the global situation has only gotten worse, and so has Dong-hyuk's source of inspiration. In the years following Squid Game's breakout success, political division and social unrest have only intensified. Dong-hyuk pointed to everything from the rise of far-right movements across Europe to the deepening political chaos in his home country of South Korea, where a former president declared martial law and was later impeached. And in the US, the Capitol insurrection on January 6, 2021, left a lasting impact. For Dong-hyuk, seeing one of the world's biggest democracies become that divided over an election was a turning point. It made him question whether voting, once seen as a shared, peaceful act, still works in a world that has become this polarized. That exact question is at the heart of Squid Game's second and third seasons, where the show introduced in-game voting. Between rounds, players are given a choice: vote vote X to end the game and split the prize money, or vote O to keep playing. On the surface, it looks like democracy, but in reality, it only divides the players even more. Groups start to form, paranoia spreads, and people begin to see each other not as fellow victims, but as enemies. All while the VIPs sit back in comfort, untouched by the chaos they created. If you thought the show's storytelling was well thought out, wait until you find out how much effort was put into designing the game spaces. Every inch of Squid Game 3's sets was created with intention, not just to look good, but to carry the same emotional and thematic weight that made season 1 so iconic. The goal wasn't to reinvent the look of the show, but to deepen what was already there, using design to reflect the bigger story being told. One of the clearest examples of this is the return of the VIP room. Since Gi-hun's character Junho would be stepping back into that space, the team debated whether they should recreate it exactly as it was in season 1. In the end, they kept the same structure, the staircase, the layout, and the overall size, but changed the atmosphere completely. Instead of the dark black marble from the original season, season 3 uses white marble meant to feel like the ocean. The idea was to reflect isolation and detachment, with the VIPs floating above it all in their own private world, unaffected by the chaos happening below. Another incredible set is the hide-and-seek arena, which feels eerily similar to the Marbles neighborhood from season 1. That wasn't entirely intentional at first, but as the story developed, the similarities naturally fell into place. Both games involved deeply emotional moments and devastating losses, so the environment had to match that energy. Watching this game, most viewers probably assumed the massive multi-level set was built from the ground up. However, to everyone's surprise, it was actually almost entirely CGI. What looked like an enormous multi-story structure was filmed on a single floor, with the rest of the set built digitally to create an illusion. The concept of this set was also based around the ocean, something that represents life, creation, and emotional depth. That idea tied perfectly into the scene where Junhee gives birth in the middle of the game, surrounded by what felt like endless water and towering platforms. However, the most mind-blowing set of all comes in the final round, Sky Squid Game. The massive geometric pillars and narrow staircases weren't just cool visuals, they were inspired by the Mobius strip, a symbol that runs throughout the entire series. The Mobius loop represents the endless cycle of life and of power and powerlessness, of trying to escape only to end up back where you started. The staircases twist and turn without entrances or exits, symbolizing the trap the players are stuck in, while cracks and crumbling structures reflect a broken system that's literally falling apart. From the shapes to the materials, everything was carefully chosen to mirror the social collapse happening both inside the game and outside of it. While watching the new season, you might have felt like the characters had a different energy to them. Spoiler alert, this was also all intentionally done. One of the clearest examples of a changed character arc is that of Hyunju. Back in season 2, Hyunju was completely focused on survival. Her goal was personal: win the prize money, get her gender-affirming surgery, and leave everything behind to start over in Thailand. But by the time we reach season 3, something in her has changed. Her reason for being in the game evolves from escaping her own circumstances to protecting someone else. Specifically, she becomes fiercely protective of Gumja and Junhee's newborn baby. When Hyunju finds herself at the exit, she could have walked away, but instead of leaving, she turns back, driven by the instinct to help, not just survive. She's beaten up, bleeding, barely able to stand, but still, she walks back into the chaos because she knows she has to protect them. Similarly, a major shift in Squid Game 3 comes through Gi-hun. In earlier seasons, Gi-hun was flawed, but still grounded in empathy. In season 3, what we see is something much darker, and it was very much intentional. Dong-yuk didn't rely on dramatic visual tricks to show this change. Instead, he built what he calls the emotional architecture of the show, letting the visual tone reflect Gi-hun's internal collapse. This time, he barely speaks. He has no real dialogue, and everything he's feeling is buried deep, only revealed through his eyes and facial expressions. It's like he's completely stuck, locked in a mental maze with no way out. His transformation is unsettling for a reason, because for the first time, Gi-hun becomes complicit. According to the director, making him commit that kind of act was one of the biggest creative risks of the season, because Gi-hun was always the one who refused to give in to the system. The fall is meant to reflect something larger, a world so divided and numb to suffering that even the kindest person can lose their way. Bringing this new version of Gi-hun to life took serious discipline from actor Lee Jung-jae. Since his character didn't have much dialogue to rely on, everything had to be expressed through presence alone. Jung-jae explained that he had to constantly stay in Gi-hun's emotional state, using image training and mental preparation to remain in character even when he was just sitting still. Even the idea to add Cate Blanchett as a female recruiter was a symbolic change no one expected. Until now, the recruiter had always been played by Gong-yoo, representing the Korean system that lures people into the game, but for the final season, director Dong-hyuk decided to flip that image on its head, introducing an American recruiter instead. He explained they wanted someone who could bring a completely different energy to the role. A woman, he said, would make the moment more dramatic, more intriguing, and Cate Blanchett, with her unmatched charisma, was the perfect choice. The cameo was so secretive that even the cast didn't know about it. Jung-jae shared that someone he knew had casually mentioned hearing a famous Hollywood actor might appear in the show, but he didn't believe it. On set, there were no hints, no announcements, just complete silence. The director later revealed that they kept the decision under wraps for as long as possible, even from important crew members. And when the time came to film the final scene, Cate and Lee Byung-hun actually shot their parts separately due to scheduling conflicts. Byung-hun didn't even get the chance to say hello despite being a longtime fan. But Cate Blanchett's sudden appearance wasn't the only surprise waiting at the end of the story. Even though Jung-jae had fully thrown himself into Gi-hun's darkest chapter, not even he could have predicted how Squid Game 3 would end. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, he admitted that after years of being so deeply connected to the role, the final twist to the show still managed to catch him completely off guard. He shared that he could never have predicted the ending, and that when he first read the script, he had to pause just to process what had happened. For someone who's lived and breathed this character across 3 intense seasons, the fact that the final moments still felt shocking says a lot. According to Jung-jae, it was so unexpected and bold that he found himself staring at the page, stunned, before eventually going back to reread it. Not only was Jung-jae surprised by the ending, but so were viewers. In fact, the finale is so layered that it needed direct explanation from Dong-hyuk himself. He revealed that Gi-hun's choice to sacrifice himself to save the baby wasn't always part of the original plot. His fate wasn't meant to end so brutally, but as the story evolved, Dong-hyuk revealed he needed to make a stronger statement. Gi-hun's self-sacrifice was meant to be the emotional and symbolic full-circle moment of the series. After all the pain, loss, and chaos he'd endured, he becomes the one to end the cycle, not for himself, but for the next generation. Dong-hyuk explained that the baby was supposed to represent the future, and that Gi-hun's decision to let the baby live and win was a direct message to today's world. In a society drowning in late-stage capitalism, extreme inequality, and growing individualism, Squid Game dares to ask, what if the only way forward is by choosing selflessness? By giving something up now, can we leave behind a world that's better for those who come after us? Dong-hyuk made it clear, this ending is a critique of the systems we live in, and a call for us to rethink our obsession with self-interest and winning at any cost. In a world that feels increasingly polarized, Squid Game closes its story with one final message. Maybe hope still exists, but only if we find it in each other. But the big question remains, is this really the end? The 3rd season of Squid Game has just aired, and despite the fact that it has been marketed as the final chapter of the series, what happens at the end of the show basically confirms that a 4th season will happen. When the original Squid Game became a global hit in 2021, the show wasn't planned to have a sequel. However, the producers took advantage of the huge success of the series to announce a 2nd season, making fans all over the world very excited. Then, as season 2 approached, the production team revealed that the story of the sequel had been divided into 2 parts, meaning that there would be a 3rd season too. In fact, the 2nd season ended with a dramatic cliffhanger, leaving viewers on edge and curious about the sequel. Luckily, fans didn't have to wait too long to see how the story would continue, as the 3rd season came just 6 months after the 2nd one. While curiosity about the new season was already high, the production team increased the hype by stating multiple times that season 3 would be the final chapter of the story of Squid Game. However, the director of the series, Hwang Dong-hyuk, has been more ambiguous on the matter. This past January, he said that he viewed the 3rd season as the final chapter of the saga, as it would give closure to the character of Song Gi-hun and would also mark the completion of the story that he wanted to tell about our modern society. Despite this, he didn't completely rule out a return of the Squid Game concept, confessing, "If I ever wanted to go back to the world of Squid Game, it would be about different characters with a different story arc." He even described out an idea about a possible spin-off of Squid Game, focused on the story of the guards instead of the players. This is already an interesting scenario, but even more shocking news came out in October 2024, when some reports stated that Netflix was working on a possible American version of Squid Game that would act as a spin-off rather than a remake. The director of the original series basically confirmed this revelation while discussing the future of Squid Game. While talking about the show with American media outlets, the director shared that the production team was discussing with Netflix the possibility of creating a new version of the show set in the United States. He even stated directly that he knew that Netflix was planning something and that the streaming platform didn't want to throw the profitable format of the show away. He admitted that at that point he wasn't yet involved in any plans, but he didn't rule out the possibility of joining a possible sequel or spin-off as advisor or co-creator, and finally stated that season 3 wouldn't be really the end of Squid Game. According to various rumors, Netflix was indeed starting to work on a Western version of the show with director David Fincher, known for his work on psychological thrillers, including movies such as Fight Club and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and the TV show House of Cards. Despite all these rumors, the third season of Squid Game kept being marketed as the final chapter of the saga, with multiple media outlets reporting the series was over, and even one of the official posters of the show included the phrase, "the final season." However, just one day before the third season was set to release, one of the main stars of the show hinted that the series was going to continue. During a press event to promote the show, Gi-hun, who plays the role of the villainous frontman Hwang In-ho, suggested that the ending of season 3 will pave the way for a sequel rather than give closure to the series. Gi-hun also suggested that fan support might lead to a sequel, saying, "If the audience's love and support increases, we'll never know what happens." This sentiment was echoed by the other cast members too, and Byung-hun increased the curiosity even more by describing the finale of the show as a new start. While Byung-hun was clearly suggesting that there's going to be more, other members of the cast reassured fans and journalists that the third season would be satisfying. Lee Jong-jae, who plays the role of Gi-hun, stated that fans will be very happy about the finale, adding that the ending will bring some very unexpected twists. Park Sung-hoon, who portrays the pink guard Kang No-ul, confirmed what Jong-jae said, promising a satisfying end to the saga of Squid Game. She explained that the third season will give an answer to all the unanswered questions, and even went as far as saying, "I'm pretty sure it's a finale of this whole universe." With these contrasting statements made by the cast, fans became increasingly curious about how the third season will end and whether the ending will suggest a sequel or not. Now that the show has finally aired, it's clearer than ever that the third season won't be the end for Squid Game. In the final episode of the season, Gi-hun passes away and then the show jumps ahead by 6 months. At the very end of the last episode, In-ho goes to Los Angeles to see Gi-hun's daughter, but it seems like she doesn't want to know anything about her father, thinking he abandoned her. In-ho then informs her that Gi-hun has passed away and gives her her father's belongings, including the debit card with the millions of dollars won by Gi-hun in the previous games. This is already very interesting, as he didn't have to give Gi-hun's money to her daughter, let alone go all the way to Los Angeles to deliver it in person, so this suggests that In-ho has been changed by Gi-hun. However, something even more interesting happens right afterwards. As In-ho is leaving in a car, he suddenly hears the sounds of slapping and rolls down his windows to investigate. He then sees that in a nearby alley, a woman is playing dakji with a man, slapping him every time he loses, exactly as the recruiter played by Gong Yoo used to do in Korea. Recognizing the methods of the recruiter, In-ho nods to her, and she seems to acknowledge him, nodding back to him. This final scene is a huge hint that suggests that not only Squid Game isn't over, but also that the next chapter will be set in the United States. This confirms the rumors that have been circulating for months about Netflix wanting to continue to use the IP of Squid Game by creating a new series set in America. Also, all the talk about the third season being the final one was apparently supposed to mean that the South Korean portion of the series is over, but not the overall saga of Squid Game. While the new show, already dubbed by many Squid Game America, isn't confirmed yet, fans have already started to speculate about how this American version will look. First of all, it looks like it's going to be set in California, likely around Los Angeles, and the events of the show might happen just after the end of Squid Game 3. However, this isn't certain, as previously the director of the show had suggested that the third season was going to be set far in the future, even 10 or 20 years after the previous previous events. This didn't happen, as the third season happens immediately after the second one, and even the finale is set only 6 months later. For this reason, the idea of setting the show far in the future could be reused for the American spin-off, but this still seems to be quite unlikely. Regarding the cast, the American version will obviously look very different from all the other seasons, but we might see Gi-hun reprise his role as frontman in a cameo, or maybe even in a more important role. After all, the island where the games were held in Korea has been basically destroyed at the end of the third season, and it's not unreasonable to think that the operations have been moved elsewhere. This makes sense also for the story, as the VIP who financed the games will probably want to see more and won't be happy about the Korean games having been disrupted. Gi-hun's statements about a possible sequel also suggest that maybe he knows something that the other cast members don't know, and it's possible that Netflix has already approached him with the idea of reprising his role for the American version. Meanwhile, the appearance of Cate Blanchett in the role of the recruiter in Los Angeles basically confirms that she will be part of the sequel. Her presence was surely meant to introduce her officially as the new recruiter for the American version of the games, so she will certainly play a big role in the sequel. According to the rumors that are circulating now, the next chapter of Squid Game will expand on the universe of the series, showing that the games have a global scale. This also means that the show will likely explore more of the behind-the-scenes aspect of the games, with more revelations about how the system was created and who the VIPs are. The games that the participants will have to play will also almost certainly be very different from those seen in the previous seasons, and it will be interesting to see which Western games will be included. Since the show hasn't been officially announced yet, it's hard to estimate a time frame for the sequel, but it's already confirmed that Fincher will work on another project from July to December 2025, and he probably won't have much time to spare. So it's possible that Netflix will use the second half of this year to plan out the show and maybe do some casting, and the production will probably begin in 2026, when Fincher will be finally free to focus entirely on the American version of Squid Game.